Always a pleasure here at the South Point to have folks roll on in to our studios. Today, no exception. You may know this gentleman from Twitter primarily for assessing the injuries of players on the Twitter machine, injuries that are taking place in real time. Ex-NFL head team doc for 17 years and the live injury analyst at Sports Injury Central, the T-shirt of which he is wearing right now. It's David Chao. How you doing?
Good, yeah.
At Pro Football Doc, I should mention, on Twitter.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Gill.
Thanks for coming down here. I appreciate it. Can I ask you a harder, more uncomfortable question to start before we get into the Joe Burrows and the Terry McLaurins of the world?
Curveball, I like it.
Well, no, I'm just trying to anticipate what people would want to ask of you.
Sure.
And one of them, it strikes me that if I didn't ask this, I wouldn't be doing my job, which is, what is the medical veracity of sort of remote diagnosis, right? Like, I'm sure in medical school, they would tell you, yeah, it's probably not the best way to diagnose. You're comfortable with this, though.
Well, let me tell you, first of all, as we spoke about, it's about being authentic. And I make no secret that I'm not looking at x-rays or an MRI, that I'm not in the room and not treating the patient or the player. And if I were, and there are times that I actually know what happens or had treated a guy before, then I can't talk about it because of HIPAA. So the one correction I would make is that I'm not diagnosing anyone. Technically, diagnosing means you've examined and you've done something and you're telling the patient or the player what is going on. I'm not doing that. I'm looking at things from afar. And so what I do is sharing insider knowledge, not insider information.
Okay.
Big difference.
Okay.
And we're the only site that truly does injury analysis. Everyone else does injury reporting. And I'm sure you'll ask me some questions later on. But I do it from video because for 17 years, as the San Diego Chargers head team physician, I saw players on the field, on the sideline, in the locker room the next day after an MRI. Yeah. I knew exactly what it was. And I had about half an hour to kill on Mondays before meeting with the GM. Everyone in the building looked at film. So I decided maybe I should look at film. Why? I don't know. Everyone looked at film. And so I started doing that, and the video guys were nice enough to pull the end zone sideline coach's tape and the TV copy, and I'd look at it. Back then it was on a DVD they'd hand me. And I already knew the answer to the question, but the video of a traumatic injury is the question. So now I'm reverse engineering. I don't know the answer to the question, but I have the question. But I studied video for 17 years. And we've showed over time, we've actually stopped keeping the data because it just gets laborious, that we're 95% accurate.
I was going to ask you how accurate. 95?
Not 100%.
19 of 20 is pretty good, though.
Yeah, and it's not exact. Like, I'm sure you're going to ask about Joe Burrow, right? I'm not saying I can tell exactly what grade, but we said calf sprain before Zach Taylor said it. I mean, they were still on the practice field when he was carted off. Now, we think it's a higher grade strain than what Zach Taylor has said, being mild.
Okay.
So, but we can't. I'm not looking at an MRI, and we make no pretenses about that.
Well, a couple of things. One, let's just make clear. You were not the San Diego Chargers or L.A. Chargers doctor when Tyrod Taylor's lung was punctured. That was not you. That gave birth to Joe Burrow's career.
I know Justin's agent, and I joked with his agent, David Dunn, that when you signed that deal, did you give that doctor a tip? Because that launched his career, And just joking, look.
Right.
I'm actually, if you Google it, linked with it because we were the first ones to, quote, break the news of what probably happened when we looked at the video, what was happening on the sideline, the reports, and then saw that he had an injured rib on the practice report on Friday. But the news went crazy when Adam Schefter said punctured lung, right?
Yeah.
So we actually reported that. But it's common to do rib blocks in the NFL.
Let's go to Joe Burrow, since you bring him up, and he is obviously the most significant injury currently in the NFL. And it's been sort of under this weird haze of cryptic comments, right? So Jamar Chase has generated discussion for calling, he calls Burrow, he's calling for Burrow to sit out Cincinnati's opener to allow his right calf to fully heal. And then Zach Taylor just yesterday was asked the status of Joe Burrow, and he says, quote, "We'll see. I feel really good about Jake being the number 2," referring to Jake Browning. So you see Joe Burrow's injury. We all saw the video. It was a sort of from a distance. I have had 2 Achilles surgeries. So people ask me, by the way, specifically about Achilles. I'm like, do you think it's an Achilles? And I was like, it's too far. I can't tell. You knew it was a calf strain and not an Achilles, and you knew specifically the grade of calf strain is what you're saying?
By video impression, not by diagnosis. Okay.
Okay.
And we've looked at this. I've spent a couple decades looking at stuff. And no, look, Kevin Durant, I always said it looks like Achilles, though they were saying calf.
Me too, because then ultimately it had the coil happen.
Yeah, and ultimately he tore his Achilles. This is not Joe Burrow's situation. It is not Achilles. However, calf strains can linger and can get aggravated easily. I think turn back, I don't know, a handful of years, Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, December calf strain, and then all playoffs did not run at all.
Do you think he'll play week 1? Should he play week 1?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think he will be able to play. Return to play is obviously a 3-headed monster always. The player has to want to, and I think Joe Burrow's going to want to.
Sure.
Medical will need to let him, and I think medically he's available. If this were the Super Bowl, there'd be zero question. Now, management may say, because of risk of re-injury, we're going to hold you out. But I've said from day one that I believe that he would play week 1 in the NFL from the pocket, but not necessarily be as mobile. Not that he couldn't run, but he's going to be told, don't aggravate the calf by sprinting out or changing directions, et cetera. And I think he's going to play. But it's coach speak. That's what we do. We interpret coach speak.
Is medical, you refer to the medical team as medical, are they compromised in this? How does it usually work with NFL teams? Are they truly in a vacuum where they give their true Hippocratic oath, best medical opinion, or are they so compromised in all this that ultimately their say won't go very far?
Well, each team is different in terms of how much say the doctor or the athletic trainer has. And when I say medical, it's not always just the doctor, athletic trainer, physical therapist, who's ever in the building, et cetera. I never had a problem with it. That's the biggest fallacy. People are like, oh, you can't, how can you work for the team and the owner? How can you be good to the players? I look at it this way. If you work at a bank, your job is to take care of the assets. You work at a bank, take care of the money. You work for a team, what are the assets? It's the players. Take care of them and be honest with your opinions. I never had any problem. The ownership and management never forced me to do anything. As a matter of fact, it was always players who drove me to, hey, let me go. I can do this. Shoot it up. Let's do X, Y, and Z.
We only have a minute left here. Terry McLaurin, the incomparable Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commodes, toe injury, 2nd preseason game. They obviously held him out since then. What do you think about that injury and how long could that affect him?
Our first initial in-game video impression was turf toe, and we think it's significant, at least grade 2, by video. I think it's going to affect him, and this is why we've lowered his fantasy draft season 6 score. His week 1 6 score is low. Look, when you have turf toe, even if you can play, it's hard to push off and accelerate and change directions. So even if he can play, if I were the Cardinals and defensively, I'd say, well, probably half his route tree is gone because he can't plant off that right foot and one cut go left.
And the only cure is rest?
Rest, the steel plate in the shoe, sometimes injection, but players don't like playing with a steel plate because it takes away their mobility. So if he plays, I don't see him being 100%. If he plays, if it's a normal prop, take the under.
It's not the answer I wanted, but fascinating. I appreciate you coming by. All of that is very interesting, getting that perspective, which we don't normally get. David Chao, Dr. David Chao, again on Twitter at ProFootballDoc.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.